Hey everyone! Tonight we step into a quiet house where the air feels colder than it should, and where a single, unexpected visitor is about to uncover a truth no family ever wants to face. I can still see the moment in my mind, Grant standing in my doorway with snow melting off his coat, staring at a home that used to be full of laughter but now felt like a hollow shell. You might not survive this one. Not emotionally, at least. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I always love seeing where my stories travel. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise. And let's begin tonight's journey together. I remember hearing Grant's footsteps the second he stepped inside. Slow, hesitant, like he wasn't sure this was really the same place where we'd hosted birthdays, Thanksgivings, and Harold's retirement party. The house used to smell like fresh bread or lavender, depending on the season, but that morning, all you could smell was the cold hum of an empty refrigerator and the faint dust of a home that had slowly stopped belonging to me. "Paula," he whispered, his voice cracking like something fragile inside him just broke. What happened here? He wasn't asking me, not really. He was asking the walls, the carpet, the bare floor where the dining table once stood. His boots echoed through the living room, because there was nothing left to soften the sound. No sofa, no chairs, just open space and a thin winter light. Old age wisdom says the quietest rooms hold the loudest stories. And let me tell you, that room was screaming. Grant opened the fridge next, a single bottle of water, half a stick of butter, one onion rolling in the drawer like it was trying to escape. His head snapped toward me, and the look in his eyes. I'd only ever seen something like that during my years at the hospital, when family members realized too late that a loved one was suffering in silence. He closed the refrigerator slowly, as if anything faster might make him lose control. "Paula," he said again, "you get $7,000 a month." $7,000. Where is it? My throat tightened. I wanted to answer, I truly did, but my voice felt like it had been stored in a dusty drawer somewhere, forgotten. Before I could try, footsteps thudded down the hallway. Nolan emerged, hair messy, expression stiff. He'd always been handsome in a quiet way, but lately there was a hardness in his face that didn't belong to the boy I raised. He crossed his arms and said in this unemotional, matter-of-fact tone, "I give all of Mom's pension to my wife. She manages it better than Mom." Grant's body went perfectly still, and I thought, oh no, because a man like my brother doesn't shout when he's angry. He absorbs. He calculates. He becomes quiet in the kind of way that shakes you more than yelling ever could. What he said softly. Nolan shrugged, like he was doing me a favor. "Mom stresses too much over bills. Sloan makes better decisions. We're helping her, helping me." That phrase has gotten more people in trouble throughout history than the invention of fire. Academically debatable, but I stand by it. I felt my hands trembling. I knew Grant's temper wasn't quick, but it had a long fuse and a bright explosion at the end. But instead of raising his voice, he simply took off his coat, slow, deliberate, folded it neatly, placed it on the empty counter. That quiet moment felt more dangerous than any fight I'd ever seen. He finally spoke. "Nolan," he said, "do you understand what you just admitted?" My son rolled his eyes. "Oh, stop being dramatic." Grant turned toward me then. Not to accuse me, no, he looked at me like a man seeing a wounded animal trying to hide the pain. "Paula," he said gently, "how long have you lived like this?" I swallowed hard. 13 months. The number floated in the air like a confession. Grant sat down slowly and resting his hands on his knees. 13 months, he repeated, in an empty house, eating almost nothing, with your own money gone. Nolan stepped forward defensively. "Mom isn't starving. She just eats light." Grant lifted one eyebrow in a way that would make a grown man rethink all his life choices. "She weighs less than she did in high school, Nolan." For a moment, nobody spoke. And then an offbeat fact flickered through my mind, a weird, misplaced thing I'd read years ago. "Did you know hummingbirds can starve in just a few hours without food?" That's how I felt. Fragile, constantly on the edge, but I kept that to myself. Grant stood up, the decision already forming in his shoulders. "This stops today," he said quietly. "Right now." Nolan scoffed. "You're overreacting." Grant ignored him. He looked directly at me. "Paula, tell me everything." And something inside me finally opened. I told him about the bedroom I was pushed out of, the bank card I handed over, the meals that grew smaller, the things that vanished from the house my wedding frame, the lamp Harold loved, the sofa we bought on our 10th anniversary. I told him about the journal, about the $37 left in my account, about the nights I ate crackers while they ordered takeout, about the recordings of conversations I captured because I didn't know what else to do. When I finished, Grant didn't speak for a long time. He just inhaled deeply, exhaled slowly, and then pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Arthur," he said, "and Camilla. This isn't just family drama. This is elder financial abuse." Nolan's face went pale. Sloane's voice floated down the stairs. "What's going on?" Grant glared up. "Perfect timing. You stay there. You'll want to hear this." I felt myself trembling, not from fear this time, but from something I hadn't felt in a long while. Hope. Grant touched my shoulder gently. "Sis," he whispered, "today is the day this ends." Maybe it was old age wisdom whispering to me, or maybe just the trembling strength left in a tired body, but I lifted my chin, looked around the empty house that once held my whole life, and said softly, "All right, then let's tell the truth." The truth, once you finally let it out, doesn't trickle, it pours. And once it starts, you can't push it back inside no matter how hard you try. As Grant stood there, steady as an oak tree in a storm, I felt the story unraveling inside me, thread by painful thread. I didn't want to cry in front of him, but my voice wavered anyway. Not from weakness, just from the weight of remembering. I told him everything began the afternoon Nolan lost his job. That moment, the slump in his shoulders, the way his voice cracked when he whispered, "Mom, I don't know what I'm going to do," is burned into me as sharply as any memory from my nursing years. Because when a mother sees her child broken, she doesn't think rationally, she thinks emotionally, instinctively, and sometimes foolishly. I remember making him tea. Even though my hand shook so badly the cup rattled on the saucer. "Stay here for a bit," I told him, "just until things settle." I didn't know a bit would turn into something that consumed my entire life. At first, everything seemed temporary, manageable. I cooked for them, cleaned for them, smiled through the worry. I even welcomed Sloane warmly, maybe too warmly. She arrived with her glossy hair and her soft voice saying, "Don't worry, Paula. I'll help out around here. We'll be a family." Funny how peace and manipulation sometimes wear the same perfume. They moved into the master bedroom without hesitation. It's just easier. "Mom," Nolan said, helping himself to my dresser like he'd earned it. "Sloane has work calls, and this room is bigger." I remember nodding, as if giving up the space Harold and I built where he held me during sleepless nights, where we whispered dreams into the ceiling, was no big deal. Old age wisdom says if you give someone an inch, they'll take a mile. I handed over a bedroom and somehow lost the entire house. I moved into the little room downstairs. A storage room, really. It still smelled faintly of old paint and mothballs. I tried to make it cozy, a blanket here, a lamp there, but no blanket warms a room built for boxes, not people. Still, I told myself, this is just for a few months. Then the money conversation started. Soft at first. "Mom, let me handle the bills," Nolan said gently. "Seniors get scammed a lot." Sloane added sweet on the surface, but her words ran like cold water down my spine. I hesitated, but when Nolan looked at me with those sad, tired eyes, I remembered from his childhood. Something in me melted, so I handed him my card, the numbers, the trust Harold and I spent a lifetime building. And that was the moment quiet, simple, easily overlooked, where everything shifted. At first, he gave me updates, told me things were under control, brought home groceries, even handed me a crisp $100 bill once. "Get yourself something nice," he said, smiling the way he used to. But within weeks, the bank password changed. 2-factor authentication, he explained casually. "I'll manage it. don't stress." I didn't want to seem ungrateful or suspicious, so I nodded. That nod cost me more than I knew. Food changed next, not all at once, but slowly, like the way you lose sunlight before you even realize it's dusk. Fresh fruit vanished first, then chicken, then milk. I asked about it once, just once. Sloane didn't even look at me when she answered. "At your age, eating less is healthier. Trust me." Her tone was soft, but I knew pity hiding behind a condescending smile when I heard it. As a nurse, I saw it in families who quietly decided a patient was more burden than blessing. And that's when the hunger began quiet, discreet, easy to excuse. A little dizziness here, a skipped meal there. Did you know? Here's a quirky fact for you, that older adults often mistake hunger for fatigue. That's what I did. I slept more, thinking I was just tired. Looking back, I wonder how many times I confused neglect for normal aging. The house began to empty next. First the lamp Harold loved, then the sofa where he read the newspaper every morning, then the wedding photo. I asked about each thing, and the answers came quick. "Oh, it was old. It was broken. A friend needed it. We donated it. Mom, don't stress." But something felt wrong. Not just the missing items, there was something cold under their words, something calculating, something that didn't feel like family. So I started keeping a notebook, just small things at first, dates, missing objects, bank withdrawals I didn't remember making, odd charges, little dots that didn't connect yet. But one day, I opened my old email archive one Nolan must have forgotten to unlink, and I saw statements with numbers that twisted my stomach into knots. Transactions to boutiques, restaurant bills, online shopping, payments labeled business investment, almost all from my account. My balance drained, month after month, until the morning I went to withdraw cash for fruit at the market, and the ATM told me I had $37 left. $37, after a lifetime of saving, after decades of serving others. That moment still stings. When I returned home, Nolan brushed it off. "Mom, I had to cover debts. Stop worrying about money. You don't get how things work now." That phrase, "you don't get how things work," that's academically debatable. But in my experience, it's what people say when they're doing something wrong and need you to feel too old to question it. I swallowed the hurt, and after that, I stopped asking questions out loud, but started asking them silently and writing the answers down. Some nights, when they laughed upstairs over takeout meals, I sat in my room, sipping hot water to trick my stomach into believing it had eaten. I listened to their footsteps, their voices, their jokes about money. Once, I heard Sloane say, "If she ate like us, we'd go broke." They laughed. I cried into a pillow. It was during one of those nights that I decided I needed proof, real proof. So I dug out an old phone I'd kept in a drawer, not fancy, but it recorded clearly. I recorded everything after that. Every argument, every cruel joke, every mention of money, every manipulation, every missing piece of my home. And still, even with all that evidence, I stayed quiet. Because you can gather facts all you want, but the courage to use them is something you must grow like a seed in the dark. It took 13 months for that seed to break open. And it sprouted the moment Grant stepped into my empty living room. When he looked at me, really looked at me, not as a burden, not as someone failing at old age, but as his sister who needed help, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A lifeline. And that lifeline is what carried me into the moment that changed everything. The moment I finally spoke the truth out loud. That's when Grant said the words that would crack open the entire nightmare. "This isn't a family issue anymore, Paula. This is a crime." And I realized I wasn't crazy. I wasn't weak. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being abused. And someone finally saw it. When Grant said the word crime, something inside me shifted like a window cracking open in a room that had been sealed for far too long. I felt air rush into places inside me that had been starving. It wasn't courage exactly. It was recognition, the kind of realization that hits you late in life when you finally understand that surviving doesn't mean staying quiet. Surviving sometimes means speaking exactly when your voice is the smallest. Grant stayed standing in the center of the room, his back straight, his jaw tight. I'd seen him angry before once at a high school principal who unfairly suspended his daughter, but this was different. This was a quiet storm, the kind that builds and builds before anyone hears thunder. It made Nolan shift nervously, though he tried to hide it behind an annoyed eye roll. "It's not that big a deal," Nolan said flatly. "Mom is being dramatic. She's older. You know how she gets." That sentence had claws. Older, dramatic. You know how she gets. Those phrases are dangerous. I've heard them hundreds of times in hospitals' caregivers dismissing elderly patients, convincing themselves that forgetfulness means permission to take control. Old age wisdom says this: if someone repeatedly tells you you're confused, eventually you'll stop trusting your own memory. I almost did. But as I stood in that empty, echoing house, I realized I remembered everything all too well. I took a breath, steady and slow. "Grant," I whispered, "let me tell you." He nodded. "I'm listening." So I told him about the bedroom, about being moved downstairs for convenience, about Sloan walking into my room without knocking, smiling that tight smile that said, "I'm doing you a favor by violating your space." I described the day Nolan asked for my PIN, how ashamed I felt for hesitating, as if saying no would make me selfish. "I didn't want to burden them," I murmured. Grant shook his head slowly. "Paula, you were never a burden." But I didn't feel that way then, and every mother listening knows exactly why. When you've spent your whole life caring for someone, there's an invisible line. Once you cross it, you stop thinking of yourself at all. I told Grant about the night I went to the ATM and saw $37 left, how the screen glowed blue and merciless, how the world tilted around me. I didn't tell him I cried on the sidewalk outside the grocery store. Some things you keep to yourself. Nolan scoffed, arms crossed. "Mom misunderstands things. We talked about those withdrawals." "No," Grant said sharply. "You explained them. That's not the same thing." I watched Nolan's confidence falter. Just a bit. Then Grant asked the question that made me feel both ashamed and relieved. "Paula, what exactly were you eating these months?" I swallowed hard. That question didn't have a dignified answer. "Mostly noodles," I whispered, "and crackers." Sloan rolled her eyes. She exaggerates. She prefers simple food. Grant turned toward her, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. She lost over 30 pounds. Sloan shrugged, almost annoyed. At her age, Grant's voice cracked sharp, controlled. At her age, she should be treated with dignity, not rationed like an unwanted guest. I felt my throat close up. Dignity, a simple word, but one I hadn't tasted in months. And here's a quirky fact that floated into my mind at the wrong moment. Elephants in the wild will refuse food when they're grieving. They stop eating until they feel safe again. Humans, we're not that different. Grant walked toward the counter, picked up my small brown notebook, and flipped it open. He read the entries quietly: dates, meals, missing items, withdrawals. "Paula, you documented everything," he said softly. "Old habits die hard. Nurses write things down. We record. We verify. We double-check." I guess even after retirement, the instinct stayed with me. Nolan laughed dryly. "That notebook doesn't prove anything." "It proves more than you think," Grant said. "It proves she noticed, and she never stopped noticing." I felt myself trembling, but not with fear, this time with clarity. There's a moment in every long night when dawn sneaks in, faint but inevitable. That's what this felt like. Then, in the middle of the tension, a thought flashed into my mind, a strange academic notion from a psychology podcast I once heard. Abusers rarely start big. They start small. A borrowed 20, a small lie, a minimized boundary. They test how far silence will stretch. My silence had stretched far too far. I looked around at the stripped walls, the empty floors, the faint indentations where furniture used to sit. Each indentation felt like a bruise. I took a shaky breath. "Grant, it started so slowly." And then I told him about the bedroom door Sloan opened without knocking. The day I found Harold's lamp gone. The moment they took the oak dining table where Harold once carved our initials on the underside, thinking no one would ever see. I described how every lost item felt like losing small pieces of myself. By the time I finished, even Nolan looked unsettled. Maybe hearing something out loud makes it harder to deny. Grant set the notebook down with surprising gentleness. "Paula, I want you to hear me. None of this is your fault. You didn't invite this. You didn't cause it. You were trying to help your son." Tears stung my eyes, because that's what hurt the most, not the money, not the hunger, but the betrayal, wrapped in gratitude. Sloane suddenly folded her arms tighter. "Maybe you shouldn't have lived alone. Maybe you needed help." Grant turned so quickly she flinched. "Help! Help!" He gestured around the empty room. "This isn't help. This is exploitation," Nolan muttered. "We're her family." Grant's voice dropped to a low, resonant anger I rarely heard. Family doesn't take everything until there's nothing left. Something inside me cracked then, but it wasn't pain, it was release, like an old window finally giving way to fresh air. And that was the moment Grant reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and said, "I'm calling Arthur, right now. And after that, Dr. Camilla." Nolan's face drained of color. Sloane's cup rattled in her hand. My heart raced not from fear, but from the strange, startling truth that someone was finally standing up for me. Grant squeezed my shoulder lightly. "Paula, this ends today." I nodded slowly, the tremble leaving my voice. "All right," I whispered, "I'm ready." Because for the first time in 13 long months, I wasn't alone. I didn't know that a single phone call could shift the ground beneath an entire house, but that's exactly what happened. Grant stepped aside, his voice steady as he spoke to Arthur, calm, measured, professional. The kind of calm that tells you something irreversible is about to begin. Sloane backed up a step. Nolan paced, rubbing the back of his neck. I stayed still, sitting on the edge of a bare mattress that used to be a home. I felt strangely present, more present than I had in months, like someone had finally switched the lights on inside a dim, suffocating room in my mind. Grant hung up. "Arthur's on his way," he said, "and Dr. Camilla is coming too." Nolan scoffed. "A lawyer and a doctor. Seriously, you're making this dramatic for no reason." Grant turned slowly, and the look in his eyes made the room feel a degree colder. "You stole her money, emptied her home, controlled her food, forged her signature, and attempted to isolate her. If that's no reason, Nolan, then God help you." Sloane opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I used to see them both as stressed adults trying to rebuild after hardship. But in that moment, stripped of excuses, they looked smaller, like children caught sneaking out with candy, except the candy was my life. I lifted my notebook, the small brown one, and placed it on the table. "This is everything," I said softly. "Every time something disappeared, every time money was taken, every time I was dismissed." My voice felt steady in a way it hadn't for nearly a year. Nolan gave a short laugh. "Mom, that notebook is exaggerated. You're overthinking everything." "That's the thing about gaslighting," Grant said. "It makes people doubt what they know they saw. Old age wisdom says the moment you start defending your reality, someone is already trying to rewrite it." I tightened my grip on the notebook. The doorbell rang. A sound so ordinary, but my heart thudded as though the world split open. Grant opened the door and welcomed Arthur inside. Tall and gray suit, briefcase in hand, the same composed energy he carried at Harold's funeral. Behind him, Dr. Camilla entered, stethoscope around her neck, her eyes already scanning me with concern before she even said hello. "Paula," she murmured, taking my hands. "You look pale. How long have you been eating like this?" "A while," I whispered. How long, she pressed gently. "Months." Her eyes darkened. "Months is too long." Nolan stepped forward defensively. "She's fine. She's exaggerating. We feed her every day." Camilla turned toward him so sharply it made him stumble half a step back. "Every day, a half packet of noodles and crackers is not food." Sloane's cheeks flushed. "She eats light by choice." Light Camilla's voice was a whisper, but it carried. "She's in a malnourished state." I inhaled shakily. Part of me wanted to shrink away. Another part wanted to stand up straighter. And somewhere in the middle, I felt a surprising new sensation validation. the kind that feels heavier than relief and lighter than guilt. Arthur placed his briefcase on the counter, opened it, and pulled out a stack of documents. Ms. Whitaker, he said calmly, I'm here to review records and ensure you're protected. I need access to your bank statements from the past year. Nolan's voice snapped. We don't have to show anything. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Actually, you do. Sloane stepped forward, arms crossed. We've done nothing illegal. That's up for the law to decide, Arthur said, but I'm already seeing red flags. He placed the forged documents on the table, the ones with my signature that didn't match. I felt the room tilt. That's not my handwriting, I said, my voice small but firm. It felt like saying out loud what my mind had been whispering for months. You sure? Sloane asked. Grant slammed his palm on the table, making her jump. Don't you dare question her. Nolan swallowed hard. Look, I was trying to manage things. By selling her house, Arthur asked quietly, by removing her from her bedroom, by restricting her food intake, by isolating her from her friends. He lifted one paper. This is elder exploitation, he said, and that's a federal charge. Sloane's mouth fell open, Nolan's face drained of color. I watched their reactions not with vengeance, not with anger, but with a hollow ache that felt strangely peaceful. Like the moment you finally admit a truth you've been avoiding. Then another strange fact rose in my mind, not to minimize the moment, but because the human brain throws odd things at us under stress. Did you know owls can rotate their heads 270 degrees, but never 360? They can look almost all around them, but not fully. That was me this last year, turning and turning, seeing almost everything except the truth behind me. Camilla touched my wrist, bringing me back. Paula, she said softly, your pulse is very weak. You need medical care right now. I nodded. Grant stepped closer. We'll get you out of here today. Nolan suddenly snapped. We're not throwing her out. Grant turned, voice calm but razor sharp. You already did. Sloane's composure cracked. We didn't mean for it to go this far. You meant exactly what you did, Arthur replied, and now the consequences begin. He opened another folder and pulled out the repayment agreement. You will sign this, he said, sliding it across the counter. A structured repayment plan for what you've taken, and you will leave this house within 2 hours. Nolan stared at the paper like it was a snake. You can't make us leave. Grant pointed to the empty walls. You already left her, months ago. I felt something break softly. Gently inside me, a weight lifting, a fog clearing, the moment the truth becomes louder than the lies. Arthur placed a pen on the paper. Sign it, he said, or this goes straight to the prosecutor. Silence. The longest silence I've ever lived through. Finally. Nolan's hand trembled as he reached for the pen. Sloane's breath hitched. They signed, and that was the moment the house stopped being their fortress and became evidence. I exhaled shakily. I didn't feel triumphant, not even victorious, just free. Grant put a hand on my shoulder. You're coming with us now. I nodded. My voice unused, quiet. But mine finally returned. Let me get my notebook, I said. I want to take it with me. Because a house can lose everything, but the truth, written carefully in a trembling hand, remains. Leaving the house that day should have felt like escaping a burning building, but strangely, it felt quieter than that. Not triumphant, not angry, just quiet. Like the first breath after a long-held inhale. Grant kept his hand on my elbow as we stepped outside, steadying me like the wind might knock me over. Maybe it could have months of half meals had a way of softening your bones and stiffening your heart at the same time. The sun was bright, too bright. It made the peeling paint on the porch look almost glossy. A small part of me wondered if my neighbors saw what was happening and didn't know what to say. Or maybe they didn't notice anything at all. People miss a lot when suffering wears the disguise of silence. Nolan and Sloane stayed inside, signing the repayment agreement like it was a forced confession carved into stone. They were quiet now. No excuses, no arguing, just quiet. Guilt has a way of shrinking even the biggest voices. Once we got outside, Grant let out a breath he'd been holding since he arrived. Paula, I'm sorry it took me this long to get here. I shook my head. I kept telling you I was fine, and I believed you," he murmured. "That's what hurts." Old age wisdom says the strongest lies are the ones we tell ourselves because we think we're protecting someone else. Before I could respond, Arthur stepped outside holding a sealed folder evidence, documents, the forged signature, the audio files, everything. Camilla followed, her doctor's bag swinging lightly as she approached me. "We need to get you to the hospital," she said firmly. "I'm not asking." "I know," I whispered. But just then, a soft sound drifted out from the doorway behind me, the hushed whimper of someone trying not to cry. Sloan. I turned, and through the crack in the door, I saw her sitting on the bottom stair, hair messy, robe wrinkled, hands covering her face. She looked small, much smaller than the woman who had controlled everything for over a year. Her voice came out thin. "Paula, I held up a hand, not to silence her out of anger, but because I didn't have energy for apologies born out of fear rather than remorse. Nolan appeared behind her, eyes red. "Mom, please, don't leave like this. We can fix it." Grant stepped between us before I could speak. "You fix it by honoring the agreement, not by manipulating her again." Nolan looked at me instead of Grant. "Mom, I didn't mean to hurt you." "How do you hurt someone by accident for 13 months? I asked softly. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came. It was strange standing there in front of the house that had broken me, but feeling more like myself than I had in a long time. Hunger, fear, confusion, all of it dulled into something clearer. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever. Just clarity. "I need to go now," I said gently. Sloan reached out from her place on the stairs as if to grab the air between us. "We only wanted a chance at a better life," she whispered. "There's no better life built on someone else's suffering," I replied. I didn't say it with anger. I said it with exhaustion, the kind of exhaustion that makes truth come out clean and sharp. Grant opened the car door for me. Arthur closed the porch door behind him. And that's when I realized something I'd never seen before. My house, the one I loved for decades, didn't feel like mine anymore. It was just a structure now. Wood, nails, memories. The love that lived inside it had been hollowed out. As we drove away, I glanced back. The curtains fluttered gently. Light spilled across the floor inside. A house could look peaceful even when it had witnessed the worst kind of quiet suffering. The ride to the hospital was calmer than I expected. Grant kept talking softly about Denver, his neighborhood, the park across from his apartment, the bakery that sold cinnamon rolls as big as your hand. His voice served as a distraction, a gentle anchor. I listened with half an ear, half drifting through the fog of everything that had just unfolded. My stomach growled softly. I ignored it. Funny how hunger becomes a habit, not a signal. Camilla, sitting beside me, noticed. "We'll get you something to eat the moment we're there," she said gently. I smiled. A real meal sounds strange. She squeezed my hand. "It'll feel like waking up from a long sleep." Here's a quirky fact that came to mind when bears wake up from hibernation. Their bodies need time to adjust, even to simple things like water and sunlight. I felt a little like that, slow, groggy, relearning how to be alive. As we pulled into the hospital parking lot, I froze. For a moment, the smell of sterile hallways and antiseptic carried memories 40 years of working night shifts, of holding hands that were losing warmth, of whispering comfort to patients whose families couldn't get there in time. Hospitals were where I had spent my strongest years. Walking into one now, as a patient, felt academically debatable to my pride. Camilla noticed my hesitation and touched my arm lightly. "Paula, you saved so many people in your life. Now let us help you." I nodded slowly. All right. Inside, nurses moved quickly, checking vitals, drawing blood, sliding an IV into my vein. "BP 90/60, one nurse said, her voice tightening. "She's severely dehydrated." I heard Camilla's voice again, calm but urgent. "She's in malnutrition. Severe. Start fluids and order labs." And in the swirl of motion, something unexpected happened. A young nurse, maybe in her 20s, paused beside my bed. "Mrs. Whitaker." she asked softly. I blinked, surprised she knew my name. She gave a shy smile. You trained my aunt at Lakeview Community Hospital. She says you were the kindest nurse she ever worked with. I stared at her, heart swelling. A piece of myself I thought Nolan and Sloan had taken suddenly returned. It reminded me that even when life falls apart, the good you've done doesn't vanish. It waits quietly, like a letter you forgot you wrote. Grant rubbed my shoulder. You're safe now. I nodded, letting my eyes drift shut. But right before sleep took me, I whispered something I didn't expect. Something so soft, even I barely heard it. I'm coming back to myself. Waking up in a hospital bed after a year of silent suffering feels a little like opening your eyes underwater. You're conscious, but everything is muted, slowed, blurred around the edges. When I finally surfaced, really surfaced, it was the afternoon light that did it, soft, warm, and steady. It poured across my blanket like a reminder that the world still had gentleness in it, even after everything. Grant was sitting at my bedside, chin tucked toward his chest, asleep in the world's most uncomfortable hospital chair. His long legs were sprawled out, and his arms were crossed in that stubborn, protective big brother way he had even when we were kids. I studied his face lines deeper, hair more silver but still the same brother who used to sneak cookies into my lunchbox when Harold was in the ICU and I had no time to eat. Grant, I whispered. His eyes snapped open instantly like a soldier startled awake. Then he relaxed. You're up. Did I sleep long? About 5 hours. He reached forward, adjusting the blanket across my legs like he used to tuck in his daughters. You scared me. Paula. I scared myself, I admitted. He gave a small, quiet laugh. Well, don't do it again. The door opened, and Dr. E. Camilla walked in with a tablet clipped to her arm. She had the kind of walk that nurses respect calm, focused, and quietly authoritative. She smiled at me gently. How are you feeling? Tired, I said, but clear. Good, she said. Your labs confirm what we suspected. You're malnourished, severely. You've lost too much weight too fast, but the IV and iron therapy are helping already. She touched my wrist softly. I'm just glad you got here in time. I looked down at my thin arm's old skin, bruised easily. Veins mapped like faded rivers. I didn't feel fragile, but I looked it. Doctor, I asked quietly, how long would I have lasted? She hesitated just a moment, but enough for me to understand everything. A few more weeks, she said softly. Grant shut his eyes, jaw tightening. Jesus. But surprisingly, I didn't cry. You'd think I would. You'd think hearing that would break something in me. But instead, I felt a strange sense of relief. Like someone had just told me the ending of a story I'd been too afraid to finish. A quirky fact came to mind. Did you know butterflies can only fly if their wings are warm? If the air is too cold, they just sit there, unable to move. That's what I had been. A butterfly in a cold room, frozen wings, still breathing, but not alive. Now, the heat was finally returning. A nurse came in with a tray of real food chicken broth, soft vegetables, a small bowl of oatmeal, and water with lemon. Such simple things. But when the aroma reached me, my eyes stung. Grant noticed and smiled. You'd think they served you a 5-course dinner. It feels like one, I whispered. I took a spoonful of broth, warm, comforting, the kind of taste that hits you not in the mouth, but in the soul. My body reacted before my mind did. My stomach growled so loud the nurse chuckled. Good sign, she said. I ate slowly, savoring every bite like it was bringing pieces of me back. But even with comfort food, my mind drifted. Do they know I'm here? I asked softly. Nolan and Sloan. They know, Grant said. They wanted to come. I stiffened. But they won't, he continued. You revoked visitation, and I made sure the staff know. I relaxed, not because I hated them, but because I wasn't ready to face them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Camilla sat beside me. Paula, I want you to hear something important. Her voice softened. What happened to you, it has a name. You experienced elder financial abuse and coercive control. I looked at her hands, folded neatly on her lap. Does naming it change anything? It changes everything, she said, because now you're allowed to heal without blaming yourself. Grant nodded. You didn't fail, Paula. They did. I inhaled deeply, letting those words settle inside me like medicine reaching the bloodstream. That night, after Grant left to grab dinner, I stared at the framed poster on the wall, a mountain, sunrise cresting the peak. Underneath it said, "The climb is hard, but the view is worth it." Normally, I'd roll my eyes at inspirational posters, too simple, too polished, too textbook. But lying there, wrapped in a warm blanket, with an IV humming beside me, I realized something academically debatable but true. Sometimes simple words hit hardest. A nurse came in around 8 p.m. to check my vitals. "Your numbers are improving," she said with a smile. "Your brother really loves you." "I know," I whispered. "And Paula." She hesitated, then continued. "This might feel strange to hear, but you're very strong." I almost corrected her, told her she didn't know the whole story, that I'd been silent for too long, that strength didn't look like starving alone in a cold house. But I stopped myself, because maybe strength isn't always loud. Maybe sometimes it's in surviving long enough to be saved. When the nurse left, I picked up my phone, the backup one I'd used to record everything. I scrolled through the audio files, hearing my son's voice say, "Let her eat less. She doesn't need much." Still made me flinch. I felt anger rise, then soften. Hurt still sat deep, but something else was forming. Resolve. I deleted nothing. Evidence matters, but I placed the phone down as gently as you place flowers on a gravesite. Not burying the past, just letting it rest. Grant returned with a cup of mint tea, brought you something warm. The smell filled the room, soothing, herbal, soft. I sipped. "Grant." "Yeah, thank you." He smiled faintly. "For what?" "For coming, for seeing, for believing me." "You're my sister," he said simply. "You were the strong one for decades. It's my turn." I set the cup down. "I want to go with you, to Denver. When I'm discharged, I don't want to go back to that house." Grant's whole face warmed. "Then you'll come with me." The truth settled around me like a blanket. I wasn't going back. Not to hunger, not to fear, not to silence. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. A quiet whisper inside me saying, "You're not done. You're beginning?" And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The morning I was discharged from the hospital felt like stepping into another lifetime, one where I wasn't a ghost, drifting through my own home, but a person again. A woman with a pulse, a purpose, and a brother waiting with the car warmed and a bag of fresh groceries in the back seat. Grant kept fussing with the seatbelt as if I were made of porcelain. I let him. It felt good to be cared for in a way that didn't cost me pieces of myself. "Ready?" he asked gently. I nodded. "More than you think." The drive back to my house, the house that was no longer mine, was unnervingly quiet. Trees along the roadside blurred past, bare branches scratching at the winter sky. My hands tightened on my lap. That house held 13 months of fear, hunger, and disappearing dignity. But it also held my memories with Harold, and memories, even painful ones, deserve a proper goodbye. Grant parked out front, the same pale paint, the same porch, but nothing felt the same. "Are you sure you want to go in?" he asked. "Yes," I whispered. "I need to close it myself." There's an old saying I once heard something about how doors only close properly when you turn the handle yourself. That felt painfully true, and maybe academically debatable, but true all the same. Arthur was already inside with 2 real estate contractors, a clipboard tucked under his arm. The walls were newly painted, everything polished and brightened. If you didn't know better, you'd think this house had been loved, but love doesn't echo. And this house echoed in every corner. I stood in the entryway, letting the air settle around me. For a moment, I pictured Harold's boots by the door, his jacket on the hook, the smell of his coffee drifting through the house. The ache that hit me wasn't sharp, it was soft, like a bruise pressed gently. Arthur approached. "Paula, everything is nearly ready for the listing. The forged signatures have been documented, the hold on the accounts is in place, and your repayment plan is officially recorded." I nodded. Thank you. He gave me one of those small, respectful smiles older attorneys seem to master. You don't have to thank me. What happened here was wrong, and now it's getting set right. I walked through each room slowly. The living room with its new sofa, the kitchen scrubbed spotless, the hallway painted over covering the faint outline where my wedding photo had hung. Each room felt like a museum exhibit of a life that never happened. Grant followed silently, letting me set the pace. I barely recognize this place, I said. That's the point, Arthur replied softly. In the backyard, the winter breeze brushed my face. The lavender bushes Harold planted were still there, brown from the season, but alive. They'd come back in spring. I touched one gently. I'm taking 3 things, I said. Grant nodded, waiting. I picked up the framed picture of Harold, the one with his quiet smile and gentle eyes, then the small box of Nolan's childhood keepsakes tucked into the back of a closet, and finally, a stack of old thank you letters from patients written in shaky handwriting, full of gratitude. Nothing else, I whispered. When we stepped back inside, I saw something surprising. On the counter, Sloan had left a pair of house keys and a note. We are leaving now. We will honor the repayment. I'm sorry. No excuses, no pleas, just that. For the first time, it felt real. I placed the key on the table. Let's go, I told Grant. He locked the door. I turned the handle once. It clicked softly, a sound so small you'd miss it if you weren't listening closely. But to me, it sounded like the final page of a long, painful chapter. 3 months later, Denver welcomed me with sunlight, dry air, and a view of the Rockies that looked like hope, stacked in layers. Grant found me a little place near a park small, warm, with a kitchen that actually felt like a place meant for cooking, not rationing. The Kansas house sold for $230,000. Not as much as it could have been, but enough to close out the past. Arthur recovered $22,000 from Sloan's boutique accounts. The repayment started right on time, $1,400 every month, not a penny late. I opened my own bank account at a new bank, my name, my fingerprint, my control. I took a photo of the debit card and whispered, half joking, "Hello, freedom." Grant grinned when I told him, "You're becoming modern." "No," I said, "I'm becoming myself." Denver had a way of giving me peace in small pieces, morning walks around the lake, mint tea on the porch, saying hello to neighbors who didn't know my story and didn't need to. I cooked chicken soup, real chicken soup with vegetables and herbs. When the smell filled the kitchen, I cried not from sadness, but because the scent reminded me that I could nourish myself. Here's a surprisingly quirky fact, apparently. Humans cry when they feel safe again. Something about the body releasing old stress. If that's true, I made up for a year's worth of it. Nights were softer. Sleep came easier. I didn't wake up at the sound of footsteps or doors opening. I didn't hide crackers in drawers just in case. For the first time in over a year, my dreams weren't about losing things. A month after moving in, I bought a small notebook, new cover, new pages, and wrote, "Joy of the day warm soup, open windows, no fear." By winter, the healing had settled deeper. My skin looked healthier. My hair stopped thinning. My smile felt natural again. Sometimes Grant teased me, "You're glowing." That's because I'm fed. We laughed, really laughed, and there was no bitterness hiding underneath. One evening, while we were having dinner, I told him, "I'm thinking about volunteering, maybe helping older women recognize the signs of financial abuse." His fork paused. His eyes softened. "Paula, that's beautiful." "It feels right." He nodded. "You'll help so many people." "I hope so," I said. "If I survived it at 70, maybe someone else will survive it at 60 or 50 or 80. Because healing doesn't end when the wound closes. Healing ends when you use what hurt you to protect someone else. As I washed dishes that night, looking out at the soft Denver skyline, I realized something true and strangely freeing. The house in Kansas wasn't my ending. It was my rebirth. And I didn't just escape. I returned to myself. I used to think recovery happened all at once, like a switch flipping in your mind, or a door opening to bright light. But it doesn't. It comes slow, patient, almost shy, like a shy cat that approaches, retreats, then approaches again when it feels safe. That's what my healing looked like in Denver. Not fireworks, just gentle steps toward myself. The morning after I moved in with Grant, I woke up to the smell of toasted bread and brewed coffee, real coffee. Not the weak, instant kind I had gotten used to. The aroma wrapped around me like a warm blanket. I sat up slowly and realized I had slept the whole night without waking once, without listening for footsteps or worrying about the next day's meals. "Good morning, sis," Grant called from the kitchen. "Hungry." I laughed softly. "More than you know." He handed me a plate scrambled eggs, fruit, a slice of toast with butter melting slowly on top. It felt like a feast, as though each bite was reminding my stomach what care tastes like. I ate slowly, savoring everything. "You need to regain your strength," Grant said. "No rush." "Thank you," I whispered. "No," he replied gently. "Thank you for letting me help." Old age wisdom says that sometimes the hardest part of healing is accepting the softness you were denied. And that morning, I felt it. Softness, safety, nourishment. After breakfast, I walked out onto the small balcony. The crisp Denver air filled my lungs, a clean, dry cold that woke every cell. Far in the distance, the Rockies were dusted with snow, standing tall like patient guardians. I watched a pair of sparrows hop along the railing, chattering like they were sharing morning gossip. One of them tilted its head as if asking, "Where have you been?" "I'm home," I whispered. And for the first time in months, I felt the truth of it. In the days that followed, my body adjusted slowly. My energy came back in little waves, never consistent, but always gentle. Walking became easier. My hands stopped shaking. My cheeks regained color. Every small change felt like reclaiming a part of myself. Here's a quirky fact I learned during my recovery. Hummingbirds must eat half their body weight in sugar every day, just to keep their wings beating. Healing feels a little like that. You have to feed yourself, emotionally and physically, just to stay afloat. Grant made sure my meals were regular, real meals. Veggies, protein, warm soups. Some nights he brought home salmon or roasted chicken. "Doctor's orders," he'd say with a grin. "High-nutrient foods." Other nights, he'd sit at the kitchen table reading his book while I wrote in my notebook. Not the old brown one full of pain. This was a new one. Clean pages. A different future. Each entry felt like a step forward. September 12th, walked 15 minutes without stopping. September 13th, bought new shoes. My size, my choice. September 14th, slept 8 hours. 8. Grant saw me writing one evening and smiled. "Tracking progress, tracking life," I said. "It's been a while." A week later, Arthur called with updates. His voice sounded more hopeful than I ever remembered. "Paula, the funds from the house have cleared. Your new account is officially active. Everything is secure. No one will have access but you." It took me a moment to respond. I kept repeating the phrase in my mind. Your account, your access, your name. "Thank you," I whispered. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "This is justice." Justice, not revenge, not punishment, just balancing the scales. My first big outing was a simple walk to the park. Grant insisted on coming along just in case, but I teased him the whole time. "Grant, if a squirrel attacks, I'll handle it." We both laughed, but I could see worry hiding behind a smile. Trauma ripples not just through the one who lived it, but everyone who loves them. The park was quiet except for children playing near the swings and a couple of joggers circling the lake. The water reflected the sky blue, calm, endless. I sat on a bench and watched the ripples. "This feels strange," I admitted. Strange how Grant asked. Strange to be outside without fear, to choose where I sit, to choose when I eat, to choose anything. Grant's breath softened. "That's what freedom feels like." "Paula, sometimes it feels strange at first." I nodded, letting the sunlight warm my face. That afternoon, I received an envelope from the bank in Kansas City. Inside was a refund check for $22,000, the recovered fraudulent transactions. I stared at it for a long moment. "Wow," Grant said. "That's something." "It's more than something," I whispered. "It's proof I wasn't imagining everything." Old age wisdom says money isn't happiness, but being deprived of it can carve deep wounds. Holding that check felt like holding validation in printed form. In the evenings, Grant and I would watch TV, old movies, cooking shows, and the news. Sometimes we didn't talk at all, and silence, finally, felt peaceful instead of heavy. One night, while eating homemade chicken soup, I said, "I want to start therapy." Grant looked up, surprised but proud. Camila recommended it. "I know." I said, I think I'm ready." The next day, I called the counseling center Dr. Camila had referred me to. The woman on the phone had a warm voice. "We actually have an opening next week," she said. "Would that work?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "It would." My therapist's name was Marissa. Her office was in a small building with pale green walls and a window overlooking a tiny garden. She offered me tea, and I accepted it. That warmth in my hands grounded me. She listened without interrupting as I explained the past year. "When I finished," she said softly, "Paula, what you experienced is called coercive control. It's real, it's intentional, and it is not your fault." Hearing that felt like someone unclenched a fist around my heart. Marissa gave me homework. Write a letter to myself. No judgment, no correction, just honesty. That night, at my little desk in Grant's apartment, I opened my new notebook. "Dear Paula," I wrote, "you survived a year they tried to erase you, but you're still here, and you're allowed to heal." When I finished, I felt lighter. As days passed, I cooked more, ate more, walked more. Breathing didn't hurt, and slowly, without ceremony, I began to imagine a life beyond survival, a life with choices, a life with purpose, a life where no one would ever again tell me what I needed or who I was allowed to be. One evening, Grant was reading on the sofa when I turned to him and said, "I'm thinking of starting a support group." He lowered his book. "For what?" "For women like me," I said. "For women who don't know they're being controlled. For women who think losing themselves is normal." He stared at me for a long second, then his eyes softened. "Paula, that's incredible." I smiled. "It feels right. Because healing isn't just about restoring what was lost. It's about giving meaning to what survived." And I was ready, truly ready to start again. It's funny how healing looks different when you're older. There's no dramatic transformation, no waking up brand new. Instead, it feels like coming back to yourself piece by piece. In moments so quiet you almost miss them, like the first time I realized I could walk into the kitchen without feeling guilty for wanting a snack, or the first evening I sat with a cup of tea and didn't flinch when someone closed a door. Little freedoms, tiny, ordinary things that once felt impossible. Marissa, my therapist, often said, "Paula, you're not rebuilding a broken house. You're renovating a home that always belonged to you." That line stuck with me, maybe because I knew she was right. My sense of self had never disappeared. It had only been buried under fear, exhaustion, and heartbreak, but it was still mine, still alive. And Denver helped me uncover it. Every morning, I opened my window to birdsong and the soft hum of early traffic. The air had that clean Colorado crispness to it, dry, bright, full of possibility. I'd walk to the nearby park with my notebook, finding a bench under the old elm trees where the leaves whispered in the wind. That sound always reminded me of Harold, the way he used to whistle while tending the lavender garden. Sweet, calm, familiar. One day, while watching the ducks glide across the little lake, I wrote something in my notebook that surprised me. I am no longer afraid of silence. And it was true. Silence used to feel dangerous in that house in Kansas, like a warning before the next cruel remark or the next missing item. But now silence was relief. It was peace. It was mine. Grant noticed the change before I did. "You're standing taller these days," he said one afternoon as he chopped vegetables for dinner. I chuckled. That's because I'm eating real food again. My spine remembers what nutrients feel like." He laughed, then paused, studying me quietly. "You're coming back." "Paula." "I'm trying," I said. "You're succeeding." We cooked together that night, nothing fancy, just roasted chicken with potatoes and carrots, but the kitchen felt warm, full of light and comfort. I stirred a pot while Grant told me about a neighbor who tried to shovel snow with a garden rake, and I laughed so hard I had to set down the spoon. Laughter, belly-deep laughter. I hadn't heard that sound from myself in a long time. Later, while drying dishes, Grant said, "You're stronger than anyone I know." I didn't answer, but inside, something settled, like a puzzle piece clicking into its place. A quirky fact I'd recently learned from one of Marissa's books popped into my mind apparently. Octopuses have 3 hearts, and 2 of them stop beating when the animal swims because it tires them out. "Sometimes we survive by resting," the book said, "not by pushing." Maybe that's what I'd been doing, resting my way back into life. Around mid-November, something unexpected arrived in the mail, a small invitation from the local senior center. They were hosting a talk on financial independence and safety for older adults, and asking for volunteers to share real-life experiences. There was a little note handwritten at the bottom. "Paula, your story could help someone else. June from the book club." June was one of the first friends I made in Denver, a retired teacher with snow-white hair and a laugh that shook the table. I had shared a small piece of my story during book club once, and she had listened with a kind of fierce empathy I wasn't used to. I read the invitation 3 times before tucking it under the fruit bowl. Grant saw it later that evening. "You thinking about it?" "Maybe," I said. "I'm not sure if I'm ready." "You don't have to be anything but honest," he replied. "Honesty is enough." But honesty, for me, was a mountain. It meant speaking aloud the things I had only whispered on paper. Still, the idea lingered. That night, I dreamed of Harold standing in our lavender garden, hands in his pockets, smiling at me like he always did. "You still have light in you," he said, his voice warm. "Don't hide it." I woke with tears on my pillow. Later that morning, I found myself picking up the invitation again, and this time, I didn't hesitate. I called the number. "This is Paula Whitaker." I said, "I'd like to volunteer." The coordinator sounded thrilled. "We'd be honored. We have many attendees who've gone through similar experiences. Your voice could be the spark someone needs." Spark, not survivor, not victim, spark. In the week leading up to the talk, Marissa helped me craft what she called a gentle truth. Not dramatic, not devastating, just honest, steady, and clear. A message rooted in dignity. "You don't need to relive the worst moments," she said. "You just need to give others permission to name their own." The morning of the event, I stood backstage clutching my notebook. My hands trembled not from weakness, but from responsibility. The room beyond the curtain buzzed with soft conversations. When my name was called, I took a slow breath and stepped out. About 30 people sat in folding chairs, women mostly, a few men, many with silver hair, age-worn hands, and eyes carrying stories. I walked to the podium. "My name is Paula," I began, voice steady but soft. "I'm 70 years old, and last year, I forgot who I was." Silence settled gently over the room. I didn't lose myself in a single moment. I lost myself in little bits and skipped meals, missing furniture, and a shrinking sense of worth. I loved my son, and that love blinded me in ways I'm still learning to understand. I saw heads nodding. But healing, I continued, is real. Help is real, and you deserve more than someone else's control. A woman in the front row dabbed her eyes. "And if you see yourself anywhere in my story," I said softly, "please know this, your life is still your own, and it's never too late to take it back." By the end, several attendees approached me, some sharing their own experiences, some simply squeezing my hand. One woman whispered, "You just gave me the strength to call my daughter tonight." "Thank you." When I got home, I collapsed onto the sofa, overwhelmed but lighter than ever. Grant sat beside me, offering a cup of warm tea. "You did something brave today," he said. I looked at him, eyes soft. It felt like the beginning of something. And it was. Teaching others how to reclaim their light helped me strengthen my own. In therapy the next week, Marissa smiled when I told her about the event. "Do you see?" she asked. "Your story isn't just healing you, it's healing others." I nodded. She continued, "Trauma tries to bury you, but when you tell your story, you become the one holding the shovel." And for the first time in a long time, I felt powerful, not loud, not fierce, just steady. The kind of power that grows quietly, like roots beneath a tree. That evening, back on the balcony, I watched the sun sink behind the Rockies. The sky blazed pink, orange, gold, all the colors of a life reclaimed. Wind brushed my face, carrying the scent of pine in early winter, and I whispered to myself, "I'm still here, still alive, still becoming." A soft truth, but a real one. A new beginning, waiting with open hands. If someone told me 2 years ago that the quietest days of my life would be the strongest ones, I probably would have smiled politely and kept on doubting. But that's the thing about life at 70, it has a way of surprising you when you think you've already lived through all your chapters. Turns out, sometimes the best ones come last. Winter settled fully over Denver by the time I found my rhythm. The mornings were crisp enough that little clouds of breath formed in front of my face when I stepped onto the balcony. The trees had shed their leaves, leaving graceful silhouettes against the pale sky. Everything felt slower, gentler, like the whole city agreed I needed time to breathe. Every day began the same way I brewed cocoa or tea, watched the Rockies blush with dawn, and whispered a small prayer of gratitude, not because everything was perfect, far from it, but because everything was mine again. My breath, my meals, my decisions, my quiet. One morning, while stirring my cocoa, I realized something that made me smile. I no longer woke expecting fear, and that, for a woman who once listened to footsteps in the hallway like they were thunder, felt like a miracle. Grant shuffled into the kitchen wearing socks that did not match a habit he insisted added character to his mornings. "You're up early," he murmured. "So are you," I teased. He smirked. "Someone has to supervise the cocoa." We laughed, an easy kind of laughter that didn't require strength or pretense, the kind of laughter that builds a home without walls. After breakfast, I sat down at the little desk in my room. On it rested the small digital recorder I had bought, a modest device, no bigger than my palm. I'd been keeping an audio journal on and off, but that morning, I felt something different, like a chapter was closing, and another one wanted to be spoken aloud. I pressed the record button. "My name is Paula Whitaker," I began softly. "I am 70 years old, and I survived a kind of loneliness people don't talk about enough." My voice steadied as I continued. There were days I lived on half a cup of instant noodles, days when silence felt like a cage and my own home felt like unfamiliar territory, days when dignity felt like a distant memory. I paused, letting myself feel, not break, just feel. But today, I have a home. I have my health. I have friends and purpose, and I have my life back. There was a quiet hum in the room, gentle and affirming, like the universe had leaned in to listen. I want whoever hears this to know you deserve to live without fear. You deserve to stand up for yourself. And even when someone tries to dim your light, it can still be relit. I stopped the recording, played it back briefly, then saved the file with a name that made my lips tremble into a smile. From instant noodles to a new start, the journey of Paula Whitaker. That afternoon, Grant took me to our favorite park. The winter grass glistened with frost, and the sun cast golden ribbons through the branches. Children chased each other with red scarves trailing like comets. Watching them filled me with something warm, a sense that even after terrible seasons, joy returns like clockwork. I opened my notebook and wrote the next year's plan. 1. Give talks at the Senior Center. 2. Help launch Second Light Network. 3. Teach financial safety to older women. 4. Keep healing. 5. Keep living. Grant peered over my shoulder. "Ambitious," he said, smiling. "I lost a year," I replied. "I don't want to lose another." He nodded, Then we'll get it done. Later, back home, I set Harold's framed photo on the dining table. The late sun poured through the window, turning the edges of the photo gold. It looked almost as if he were glowing. I saved myself. Harold, I whispered. It took longer than I hoped, but I did it. The air felt warm around me, like a gentle affirmation from someone long gone but still close. That evening, I received another letter from Nolan. I didn't hesitate this time. I opened it calmly, like one opens a window not expecting a storm, but simply letting air in. He wrote about work, therapy, paying the debt, learning accountability. He didn't ask to reconnect. He didn't beg forgiveness. He simply said he hoped someday I'd find peace knowing he was becoming someone better. I read it twice, folded it, and placed it neatly in a small wooden box. No tears, no bitterness. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's choosing not to let one wound define your entire story. As night fell, I lit a candle and wrote a short note meant for anyone who would someday stumble upon my journey. If someone controls your money, so your choices, your voice, that is not love, that is not respect, and that is not your destiny. I signed it quietly. Paula. The next morning, Grant sliced fresh toast, handed me a piece, and asked, "So, what does freedom taste like today?" I took a bite and sighed with contentment. "Like salted butter," I said. "Ordinary, warm, almost too simple to explain." We stepped outside together. Snow was melting again, turning the world into soft patches of white and gold. The air was brisk but not harsh. Light spilled across every corner of the porch. And as I breathed it in, I felt something open inside me, steady, bright, unstoppable. I wasn't just healed, I was wide awake. I was walking into a new sunrise, and I wasn't afraid anymore. The journey from fear to peace is never loud. It doesn't arrive wrapped in triumph or wrapped in applause. Instead, it comes slowly, gently, like dawn spreading across a quiet room, and that's exactly how my life began again. When I look back on those 13 months in the Kansas house, I no longer see only hunger or silence or the ache of being erased. I see the woman I used to be, tired, yes, but still holding on. I see the moment Grant walked through the door, the way truth cracked open the dark, and how hope slipped back into my life one careful breath at a time. I remember the hospital lights, the trembling steps of recovery, the first warm bowl of soup after months of surviving on almost nothing. I remember learning the names of my wounds, forgiving myself for what I didn't know, and building new habits that protected instead of punished me. Denver gave me space to breathe again. Therapy gave me language. Friends gave me courage. And for the first time in a long time, I gave myself permission to live fully without guilt, without fear, without apology. I learned that justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes justice is simply living a quiet life where no one takes from you. Sometimes justice is waking up to the smell of cocoa and fresh bread and realizing you're no longer afraid of the day ahead. And if you've listened all the way to the end, I hope you carry this with you. Your dignity is not gone. Your story is not over. Healing is real, no matter your age. Light will always find a way in.